Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Billy Wilder Theater. I'm Claudia Bester. I'm the Director of Public Programs here at the Hammer Museum, and it's my great pleasure to welcome you all here tonight. The Hammer Forum is a series of discussions about current social and political issues, and it's made possible with the support of the Rosenblum Family Foundation. And for tonight's forum, we have a thought-provoking discussion planned. During the recent Altadena and Pacific Palisades fires that destroyed so many homes and lives here in Los Angeles, there was a lot of coverage and social media posts about the incarcerated individuals fighting the fires as part of California's controversial inmate firefighting program. In the channels I was seeing, there was a lot of people speaking out about the issue, but we didn't hear so much from the actual firefighters themselves. So we invited some formerly incarcerated firefighters to talk about their experiences and their thoughts about the program, including issues around compensation and possible program reforms. And it's really such an honor to have these people here who gave so much to the firefighting efforts and have them here with us in person. So now I'm delighted to introduce our distinguished guests for tonight's program, Victor Figueroa, Amika Mota, and Romarilyn Ralston. Unfortunately, two previously scheduled guest speakers were unable to participate tonight. Cody Ridley, who is lead captain of the Golden Eagles Hotshots at Sycuan Indian Reservation. He's in firefighter training for chiefs right now. And Brooks Tim, combat veteran EMT and former lead wildland firefighter. Our first guest tonight is Victor Figueroa. He's a former firefighter based in Northridge. During his 14 and a half years of incarceration, he enrolled in an undergraduate program called Inside Out Pathway to BA for incarcerated learners at Pitzer College. In the last 7 months before his release, he joined the Cal Fire firefighting program while also working on his degree. Victor is currently an intern at Inside Out Writers, a program that supports incarcerated and formerly incarcerated youth through mentorship, healing, and community building. Amika Mota began organizing for reproductive justice and young mothers over 20 years ago as a teen mother and midwife. Her passion for criminal justice reform and abolition is rooted in her own experience. She began advocating for women in prison during her incarceration, where she worked as a jailhouse lawyer, paralegal, firefighter, and mentor to many fellow inmates. As executive director and in partnership with the active chapters that make up the Sister Warriors Freedom Coalition, Amika spearheads policy and electoral strategies to shift power. And you can read her story about firefighting in the great article she wrote last year in Teen Vogue. Our moderator tonight is Romarilyn Ralston. Romarilyn is currently the UCLA activist in residence and senior director of the Justice Education Center for Claremont Colleges and the former executive director of Project Rebound at California State University, Fullerton. Her primary focus is on empowering BIPOC women impacted by the justice system, as well as other justice-involved individuals from diverse backgrounds. After serving 23 years in prison, she earned her bachelor's degree with honors from Pitzer College and then a master's degree from Washington University in St. Louis, and she's now a PhD candidate at Claremont Graduate University's Drucker School of Business. And she received a gubernatorial pardon from California Governor Gavin Newsom in 2022. After today's discussion, I want to invite you all to continue the conversation over some light refreshments out in front of the theater. And now please join me in giving a very warm welcome to Romarilyn Ralston, Victor Figueroa, and Amika Mota.
Wow, thank you everyone for that very warm welcome. Thank you for coming out today. We have some interesting comments tonight. Some things that you already know about the Incarcerated Firefighters Program, and hopefully some new things you'll learn tonight. Good evening. My name is Romarilyn Ralston. My pronouns are she, her, and I identify as a Black feminist abolitionist with an incarceration experience. I will be moderating this conversation tonight. First, let's begin with a moment of silence for all those who lost loved ones, homes, pets, and businesses to the Palisades and Altadena fires earlier this year. Thank you. Since World War II, incarcerated individuals have been essential to California's firefighting efforts, with the establishment of fire camps in 1970s expanding this role. These camps, run by California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation, train incarcerated individuals to fight fires and assist in emergencies in exchange for a reduced sentence, while providing a crucial service and saving the state approximately $100 million annually. Incarcerated firefighters earn very low wages, just a few dollars per day, highlighting a significant exploitation within the prison system. In January, we saw devastating fires in California, and over 1,100 incarcerated firefighters actively involved in combating them. Upon returning from fire camps, these firefighters will face their own challenges. The Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation, CDCR, operates 35 minimum security conservation camps with CAL FIRE and the Los Angeles County Fire Department Conservation Camp. As of January 2025, there were approximately 1,872 incarcerated people working in conservation camps, and 1,150 of them were fire line qualified crew members. Incarcerated hand crews use hand tools to aid fire suppression by cleaning brush and establishing fire lines during wildland fires. An incarcerated conservation camp worker is paid $1.45 to $3.90 per day, depending on their level of experience and the difficulty of the assignment. When working as an emergency firefighter, they are paid an additional $1 per hour, which is reimbursed by CAL FIRE and the State Emergency Fund. These pay rates are established in CDCR's Department Operations Manual. Incarcerated people working in conservation camps may also earn credits to reduce their length of sentence and may be eligible for expedited criminal record expungement upon their release. But before we begin our conversation, I'd like to acknowledge that we are gathered on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Tonga people. We honor the Tonga community, its past, its present, and emerging, and recognize their enduring relationship to this land. As we talk tonight about justice, incarceration, and labor, let us not forget that these struggles are rooted in a legacy of colonization, displacement, and state violence. True justice requires that we honor indigenous sovereignty and center land as part of our vision for a collective liberation. Thank you for being here tonight, for showing up not just with your curiosity, but also with your conscience. We're here in the Hammer Museum to confront a complicated truth that in California, some of our bravest firefighters are also our most forgotten people, incarcerated folks, fighting not just flames, but a system that burns through human dignity. As someone who served 23 years inside, I know the resilience it takes to survive prison and still serve others in the face of danger, injustice, and invisibility. Incarcerated firefighters do this every fire season, risking their lives for just a few dollars an hour while being denied basic rights upon release, including access to the very careers they've proven themselves in. Although some progress has been made towards expungements and employment, there is still much more to be done. This is the double bind. That's the second battle. This is why our conversation tonight is titled Fighting Two Battles Inside California's Incarcerated Firefighting Program. Tonight's conversation is not just about policy or punishment. It's about people. It's about survival and service. It's about what it means to be deemed disposable by the state, yet indispensable during disaster. And it's about dismantling and demanding more recognition, more equity, more justice, and more opportunities. So let's listen deeply. Let's ask hard questions. And let's remember, abolition is not just about the absence of accountability, but the presence of humanity. Please welcome again our distinguished guests to my left, Amika and Victor.
Hello, everybody.
So our first question tonight is, what motivated you to join the conservation camp program? Was it a personal choice, or were there external pressures influencing your decision? And let's start with you, Amika.
Thank you, Romarilyn. Thank you all for being out here on a late night Wednesday. I appreciate your energy and intention and interest in the topic. So my name is Amika Mota. My pronouns are she, hers. I was incarcerated. I started my time at CIW, which is a prison here down south in Corona. And when I started my sentence in 2009 in prison, I wasn't eligible for the fire camp, and or any fire program, and I didn't think I would be. At the time, the way you were accepted into a program had to do with your level of risk, and I was kind of in this category that I just never thought I would get into the program. And then in 2011, there were some internal changes that happened within CDCR, the prison, the rules and regulations, that made me eligible, or at least it was a potential that I might be able to get into the fire program. And just to say, the fire crew was always like this thing that was kind of this magical thing over there. We would see the women at CIW that wore a different uniform than ours. Their uniform was orange. And it was always something really elusive and amazing, and also something just out of my reach for sure. So 2011, when I became eligible, I applied. I was at this time I was in Chowchilla, which is a prison in the Central Valley, one of the largest women's prisons in the world. And I applied, and I at that time was competing for 10 spots. There was only 10 spots available at that firehouse, and there was thousands of women applying, that were potentially eligible. So I chose to apply and be part of the program, not because of any pressure, or also the things that you mentioned, Romarilyn, like time off of your sentence or better wages. None of those things applied. I didn't get any additional time off of my sentence. My wages never exceeded 36 cents an hour. And I did it because I wanted a change in my own path in prison, and it felt like one of the most beneficial ways that we could do your time on the inside is to be in service and working in the community. And so that was really the interest.
Oh, great. Can you explain a little bit more about applied? How does that work in prison?
Yeah, so it's basically, there's this, you have to go through a series of hoops. You have to, not only get an interview with the fire captains and the fire chief that are ultimately the people that will select who goes out to the firehouses or the fire camps, but you also have to get some support from your counselors and people inside that might be advocating for you. So yeah, the application is basically a kind of interview, and they're just getting a feel for who you are. But you still, with that many spots and that many women, it is a bit of a stretch to get it accepted.
So part of the eligibility is passing some type of interview process, as well as
Yep.
having a certain security level.
Yes. And also, you need to be able to pass a physical fitness test. And once you're out there, a whole bunch of other tests you got to pass. So that's just the first layer that gets you in the door.
All right. So Victor, how did you come to the fire camp program?
Hello, everybody. I just want to welcome everybody and thank you for being here. For myself, I was formerly incarcerated in 2010. Actually, it took me a lot longer to be in the fire service. It took up to Gavin Newsom in 2019 to pass the law to allow violent offenders to participate in fire camp. I never thought of being a forestry firefighter possible. I remember sitting down and watching Chicago Fire, and I'm like, that's honorable. Being of service and helping your community, that's something I would love to do, but I will never get the opportunity. And then a few months after the pandemic happened, he signed the bill that allowed violent offenders to participate. Based on my classification, I wouldn't be able to go anytime soon because when you're a violent offender, you start off from the highest maximum security, which is 180, level 4, high security based on your classification of your age, the crime you did. So it takes a lot longer for males that are violent to participate in the program. So it took me almost 12 years just to be able to participate in the fire program. And the whole time I was already going to groups, giving back to my community, helping other individuals as myself deal with the unsolved issues of why we committed what we did and trying to change and transform ourselves to become better human beings once we come back home. So I was already in self-help groups, participating, facilitating, and all that played in my favor once classification came by. And they seen that I was eligible for the firehouse. I actually got interviewed twice. They wanted me there, but they wouldn't allow me to go to college. So I decided to join the forestry, which is another part that you have to go through a physical. You have to climb at least 5 mountains at a certain time, and then the last mountain you have to do it under an hour, 3 times. And that's how you're selected on that. I think it's more easier for guys to make the forestry than women because there's so many camps for us, and I understand that there's a little bit for you. Besides that, the wages were the same as you said. We only got paid $1 when we're out there fighting fire, but majority of us did it because we're helping the community. We're helping the destruction. We're stopping it, and to us that gave us a sense of honor. And you can't ask for that, especially for what we went through or what we went in there for. It takes a little bit of that shame and guilt that we carry. For each one, everybody's different. I just did it based that I wanted to help, and I knew that I can be proud of myself for doing something honorable like that. So that's why I joined, not for no time off, because I got granted release from Gavin Newsom under another Proposition 261 that I was a youth offender going in. So that, based on that, I was like, go home. So I just joined the service, and everybody's like, why would you join the service, put your life on the line, knowing that you're going to go home regardless? I'm like, because it gives me a sense of peace and honor, and helping my community is the best thing I can do.
Thanks, Victor. You said a couple of things. You said level 4. And could you describe for the audience who may not be familiar with the different security levels within a prison what those levels are, 1, 2, 3, and 4? And also, you mentioned forestry. And could you define that a little bit and tell us a little bit more about CDF, California Department of Forestry, and how it operates?
Sure, not a problem. Level 4 for a lot of people don't really know. I'm sorry about that. It's you're a high insecurity. You're always on lockdown. Your majority just go out 4 hours a day to the yard, and then you're slammed in your cell. Everything is controlled by a tower that opens your door and lets you out in and out for shower or for a phone call for a certain amount of time. And then you have to get an amount of certain points to go to a level 3, which now you have the opportunity to open your doors instead of someone opening and closing them for you. So it gives you more of a freedom. And then after that, you have to go to a level 2, which is where majority of the forestry fire camps are at, that you're able to participate. But you have to go through a long of hoops to get there. You have to show that you have transformed and that you're not what they say, a menace to society anymore. You're not going to try to escape, that you're there for the right reasons. So I worked my way all the way down to the level 2, which was a blessing, and I was able to participate in forestry. And the forestry fire camp is basically we're going out in the line, cutting the line, making way for the CAL FIRE to go in there with their vehicles. We have to cut line, make sure that we stop the fire for not jumping or going to the residence area. So most likely we're like hotshots. A lot of people don't say it, but we do exactly what hotshots do. Hotshots go in there, they cut line all night. Sometimes we're up 24 hours. They said 24 up, 20 and 8 down. We're working 24 hours straight, and 8 hours we get to rest, and we continue that process till the fire's done. Which is it's really stressful, and it takes a lot on your body, especially when we're not getting receiving the amount of food, because that's mostly that was the biggest thing for majority of us, is not getting the right dietary food. We're always hungry, and because the calorie intake is burned so fast when we're out there.
Thanks, Victor. Mika, you have anything you want to add before we move on about camp being somewhat of a privilege for incarcerated folks?
Yeah, I got a few things. I was like nodding. I guess one thing that I wanted to mention, because you mentioned this in the opening and you kind of touched on this right now, Victor, but this piece that we keep talking about around choosing to go to a fire program because you could potentially get a reduced sentence. I do want to say, like, that didn't apply for myself or for Victor. But what I do want to lift up is that does apply for a lot of people that go into the fire program. And what I want to point out there is that people aren't necessarily lining up because fire is their passion and that's what they want to do, and they're eager to go put their lives on the line. Although there are plenty of people that want to be in service and make good use of their time and also be serving in community. But for a lot of people, when you are inside prison, that is the only way to get home to your family quicker. And so there's this, the notion that this is volunteer, and yes, it's voluntary, and yes, you can choose not to do it. But if your option is get home to my family, to my children sooner or not, most people would choose whatever it is that's going to get you home to your loved ones. So I do want to lift that up, because although it's a choice, it's not necessarily like, we're choosing between not the best options always. Yeah, that was one thing I wanted to add.
Thank you for lifting it up, because the fire camp program is oftentimes publicized as a voluntary program, as if, everyone wants to do this or that they have an opportunity to do it, and everyone doesn't. As you pointed out, Victor, you have to be a certain security level, go through classification, be eligible, and then go through an interview process, and et cetera, and so on. Go through the training. So there's all of these things that a person has to complete and pass before they're able to be a part of this program, because the fire camps sit outside of the prison. And so this is where I want us to go to now, is what are some of the disparities in treatment or opportunities between someone who's in the fire camp program and someone who is not. And, you mentioned that you would see these women in these orange outfits and marching around the prison and, in their groups and, their cadence and all of that. And it was exciting to see. You wanted to be a part of that group. So could you speak a little bit to your observations of any disparities in treatment or opportunities?
I'll just briefly say that I'll pass it to you. Chowchilla CCWF, which is the women's prison in the Central Valley, women's designated prison, we are housed in what's called 8-man cells there. So there are 8 of us to one toilet in a very small cell that was designed for 4, I believe. The conditions in prison are not ideal. We deal with a lot of violence on the yard, often excessive force from officers. In the women's designated prisons, sexual assault by staff is a current epidemic. People are navigating really rough conditions living inside prison. And so this appeal is usually around, like, what can I get to get to these some version of better conditions? And so there is that, different uniform, but there's also a whole lot of rumors around steak and shrimp and all sorts of things that you hear about these appeals. I never once had steak or shrimp, just to clarify, but there's been some stories. Maybe some folks have. But, there's all these kind of reasons why it sounds so appealing. But I'll pass this to you, but just to say, getting outside of an 8-man cell into a place where you can open your own door, or you have a pillow or a mattress rather than a pad on a steel frame. Those are things that are really appealing, right? And they're so small, but they do make a shift in conditions. And so, those are all the stories we hear on the inside. It sounds real good over there. But a lot of us don't really know what that actually means for us once we get in.
Well, yours is a lot different than mine. I will say that. It is appealing when you're able to taste a sense of freedom. For me, that was what it was. Being able to go hiking. I used to always love hiking with my family, so to me that's what it was for me. It was able to be going out to the wilderness and just be free, a sense of freedom finally. So that was the only appealing. The food part, we actually just fought fires to get food right. I'm not gonna lie. The only time we received any type of steak is when there was big fires like the Palisades or Eden, or there was another one by Norco Conservation, Temecula, 2 years ago. There was a big fire where I was at, and I had to sleep on the mountain. That's actually the one time that I actually tried a steak. There's no lobster or any shrimps like that. That's a lie, and everybody knows it that participates in fire. They give us a 50-pound bag of treats, almonds, bars, and sandwiches. That's all we eat when we're out there. We don't get fed like the real CAL FIRE forestry guys, Sometimes our captains will get mad because they'll eat in front of us and be like, why would you do that in front of my guys? And I respected those captains for sticking up to us because he made us feel like we're all together as one. We're not just inmates. So, in the appealing living conditions, honestly, I enjoyed being in higher security, and I won't lie, because having my own cell, it was actually more beneficial to me than being in a fire camp where everybody's running around, and where each fire camp is different and is run differently. The one where I was at, they didn't have no doors, but everybody was just able to just walk around, do the things they wanted to do, and no supervision, which to them that was just the best. Some of us govern ourselves the right way with integrity. because we knew what was right and what was wrong. But that's the difference between sometimes violent offenders and nonviolent. Nonviolent, that's just a way of going home for them, which to us is like, okay, if that's what makes you feel better, participating in this, good. But some of us, we were there for the right reasons of helping the community and giving back. So yeah, things all individual wise when it comes to that, and how, who, and what is appealing to them. I can only speak for that.
Thank you, Victor. Thanks, Amika. Let's shift to training and safety. Let's talk a little bit about what fire camp training looks like. When were you prepared for it, and what did you see other people experience through that training?
Well, the training process, I'm not gonna lie, they actually did a very good job, the captains, making sure we understood the signals when it comes to fire and understanding that we have to do an anchor point in order to survive whenever we're in.
Can you define what an anchor point is?
An anchor point is a spot where we start off, do like a 4x6 cut on the ground, making sure that there's no debris or gravel that will catch on fire. So if we get trapped, that's the way of staying safe. And understanding what the black is. The black is once the fire passes over, it won't burn again. So we had to know this stuff, like, because this is depending on our lives. So we made sure that we understood each of the signals, understanding the fire weather, and I'm really thankful for my captains because they were made sure that was the number one thing for them, making sure our safety. I can't speak for other camps, but our captains actually did the right job of making sure everybody understood their job duties and their titles and how to save themselves in case of danger, because there is danger. A lot of people don't understand that fire creates its own weather. You're out there, it can be shifting one direction, it comes right to you. I faced it so many times, and I'm glad that I had a captain that knew exactly how to keep us out of harm's way. And we were actually able to cut 4x6 scrape. A scrape is when we make sure there's no gravel, everything's smooth, that the fire wouldn't come towards us. So, but the training was, we did training every Friday. Every Friday was training day. So it doesn't matter what we're doing. That's exactly for just training. We'll train for like 4 hours or all day in order to come right back. But
So,
yeah.
Victor, I'm sorry to interrupt, but it sounds like you're describing field training outside of the prison, not
Yeah.
at the camp, but actually preparing you to go to camp. I mean, what other types of training does it take to get you to the point where you can actually go out into the field and start to practice some of these things? What are some of the other training?
The other training will be the physical fitness training. We're making sure that each person's qualified to a certain standard to endure the hardship that we have to go when we're facing a fire. And that's push-ups, running laps, carrying a person on our back, working as a unit. They make us go around certain things, carrying a heavy ball, passing it back to one another, because each tool, a person gets tired. Like I had to use the chainsaw one time. So if the regular chainsaw guy is cutting and he gets tired, he has to pass it on. So that's inside the facility. That's what the training we did. We made sure that each person understood their duties, but also what will happen if a person did go down, because it does happen. Some people are lack of water. I seen sometimes we had to help people down the mountain and have the ambulance get there and help them out. But we understood how to carry them the right way. CPR, they also showed us. We didn't have to perform it, but we understood what to do in a case that actually did happen. And besides that, it was just a lot of running, a lot of physical activity. Can't say nothing much besides push-ups and everything else.
Thank you. So, Amika, I know it's a little different for women. Can you just share with us, like, the length of time it takes to go through the physical training? Is it different or is it the same for everyone? Is there different levels? I mean, how do you learn about the fire science? What do you learn about tools? What do you learn all of these skills? Do you just learn them in the field? Is there a classroom? I mean, how do you become a firefighter inside of a cage?
Yeah, these are such good questions. So I have some unique experiences in relation to my training and also just kind of the experience of where I was at. So because I wasn't at a fire camp and I was an institutional firefighter, we responded to calls within the prisons, but also a 25-mile radius of the prison. And we had a mutual aid agreement with Madera County, which was the county we were situated in. And so the bulk of our calls were often much more like urban fire. We were doing house fires, vehicle fires, motor vehicle accidents. We had two major freeways right by the prison, Highway 99 and Highway 152. And so we often responded to motor vehicle accidents. We also went to medical calls in people's homes, so overdoses, electrocutions. Like there were such a big range of calls that we got trained for. And the training at CCWF looked like before you even could get on the truck, just as, you're still kind of shadowing people and you're not calling the shots or running the hose, but before you can even get on the truck, you have 2 weeks of pretty vigorous training. And that's the things that Victor mentioned, like the physical fitness piece. But you also had to know the name of every piece of equipment on that fire truck before you could even step foot on it. And so a lot of book training, a lot of physical training, and then, because of the types of calls we were doing, we also did this additional training that was beyond just the wildland firefighting tools. We used a lot of heavy equipment, so K-12 saws to cut into homes, jaws of life to extract people from cars. So we had, we would, have often like a couple of times a week, we would be doing these bigger, heavy equipment trainings. And and then also on our down times, it was our jobs to train each other and to just run trainings all the time so that we were continually getting better. But the other thing that was really unique about my experience was that at the time I was there, I had a chief that was really committed to us being able to leave with a certification. And that wasn't really happening at the time, but this chief really kind of went out of his way to make sure that that we got the training. So I actually was able to parole with my firefighter 1, which is equivalent to academy level basic training that most firefighters would do, before they can get on the truck as a volunteer firefighter. So that was different than camp in some ways because we're doing a lot more of the urban work. But the training also never stopped. We were always learning something new or teaching each other new skills.
Great, thank you. So how was the relationship between you, the other women, and the captains? Were there other female captains? Were there all male captains? Was there mutual respect? Was there bias, discrimination? I mean, how was the working relationship? Because there is a power dynamic happening here.
It's such a power dynamic.
And a threat.
And a threat.
That if you don't perform well here in camp,
Yep.
there is the option of sending you back to prison.
Always.
Let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, that is always hanging over your head. So 1, behaviorally, 2, injury. If you're injured on the fire ground, you're going back in. And so most people do their best to cover up injuries, to push through, to not let people know because you risk going back inside. For us, even though, we had these fire captains and fire chiefs, they were correctional officers, so very much still that same dynamic of jailer and incarcerated person. And at our station, we had 1 female captain who it was great to have her there. But the majority of captains are men, and There is always that, that you always just have it hanging over your head. If you say something out of line, or you do something out of line, or you don't follow a command or a direct order, you continually risk going back inside.
And what does that mean if you are sent back inside?
Well, it's like that back to the 8-man cell situation, right? It is back to, high power lockdowns like Victor was describing on level 4 yards. So yeah, just a lot more control over your life, and in these kind of much like rougher kind of conditions on the inside.
Victor, how did you experience any discrimination or bias?
I guess for guys it's a lot different because all our captains were males and 2 of them were Hispanics. But I'm not gonna lie, none of them treated me any differently. They treated me as a human being. The jailers were different because they didn't like us. They will still try to dehumanize us when we got back to the ground after fighting a fire to tell us to strip down, do the random routine, which we're coming from fighting a fire and we just look at them like.
What do you mean didn't like us?
Didn't like the fact that we were able to go out and provide a service of helping our communities. They felt that we were receiving some type of leniency, like being able to be out there, enjoy freedom, and to receive food. So the jailers didn't like that at all. They made it the worst for us coming back home, coming back to the dorms every day, like just to dehumanize us, making sure like you're still an inmate, you're not a forestry firefighter.
Put you in your place, in
Yeah.
other words.
That's exactly what they want to do, and we didn't like that. Even when we talk back, they'll call our captains and be like, "Hey, man, this guy's making trouble." But the captains we had our back. They were like, "You know what? We're not gonna pay attention. That's the jailers. You're a camp. You're one of us. You're not an inmate. You're a forestry firefighter." And that felt good hearing that from them. But each and every time we just dreaded coming back. And you're right about that. A lot of people don't want to get sent back to the yard if they get injured. So if you're likable and the captains do have a liking to you and you do get injured, because I got injured, I was able to stay in camp and help out decor the fire trucks, put the stickers up, and making sure that the trucks are nice and clean and fitted to go out. So I wasn't sent back because of who I was and how I communicated with them and my work ethic. They pay attention to that. But if you're someone that's like a troublemaker or likes to talk back, they will make it their point to send you back. And a lot of people don't want to go back because then you lose if you're about to go home in 2 months and you get them in the wrong side, they'll send you back and your time gets right back put on place.
That's a good segue, Victor. Can you kind of lead us in a conversation around other roles in the camp? Because at the camps, you're not just fighting fires. There's other things that people can do at camp besides go out and fight fires.
Yes, there's a lot of multiple positions that are at the camp. There's a person that cooks, laundry, administration work, that actually does a job that the captain's supposed to do, but we tend to do them ourselves. Fixing the trucks up, putting the stickers on the truck, making sure everybody has the right pack and the right tools. There's a lot of jobs that are in the camp itself, and then there's also the forestry that go out. So, like I said, if you're a likable person, they put you in camp so you can try to continue going to school, and they'll work with you. But if you're a forestry, always going out, they try not to even help you out that much. I was blessed that the captains did like me and allow me to continue going to college sometimes that I wasn't able to go out, because the Inside Out program from Pittsburgh that provided classes for us that allow professors to come in and teach during the day, or at night. So we were able to be in those classes in that space and continue our education and continue forestry, which a lot of programs do not allow because they don't want you to educate yourself. They want you to just be, this is where you're at, and that's it. So to me, it was a blessing to receive those 2 things at once, being able to pursue a bachelor's degree and being of service.
Thanks. Amika?
What, can you refresh the question for me again?
Well, I just wanted Victor to talk a little bit about the other roles in the camp. You know, what are some of the other duties that folks get to do? They don't necessarily need to be injured to do them, or, you know, what outside of fire crews is available?
Yes, absolutely. Okay, thanks for the refresh. For us, there was just these 10 spots, right? And basically 9 of those 10 were active fire crew. And then we had one position that was the dispatcher / cook. And so the dispatcher is the person that heard all the incoming calls and had to kind of take down the notes about where we were headed, and that also cooked for the crew. So that was the only position that did not require you to be actively, on a crew. So for us, we did not have that luxury. I mean, it was like that was it. You went back in because they had to have 2 full crews moving, right? And so, a typical day at the firehouse was, we were detailing engines, taking care of the grounds, doing fire extinguishers for the prisons, right? We'd go through and refill a lot of those, or so if we weren't on these, calls, either fire or motor vehicle accidents, things like that, we were just tending to the fire station, or doing trainings, things like that. But as far as like Victor was talking about the different roles, it was a little bit different just because of how small our station was. But I also there was one thing that I did forget when you talked around the discrimination, or that I did want to bring up that was, I think, I don't know if it's unique to the fire camp, but I do want to just bring up how difficult it was for Black women in particular to get into the firehouse at CCWF, so much so that they called it the White House. I mean, just for years and years, that was like what they coined the firehouse. And it was definitely we lived in an environment where there were a lot of just kind of comments around gender and race that were just tossed around very lightly. So I definitely want to bring that up because I know that it was, a lot of people wouldn't even apply.
Tossed around by who?
Their staff, correctional officers / captains.
And what were some of the things tossed around?
Well, we lived with these folks, right? So they're, the fire station was like any other kind of outside fire station. You had your bunks, and even though the captains were officers, their quarters were right next to ours, right? And so, in conversation with each other, we would hear often racist comments. In the Central Valley, there was a lot of talk about immigrants in the area, people that were doing labor, like just a lot of comments. You were just very aware of where we were, and that it was all of our staff was white, and that it was extremely hard for women of color, particularly Black women, to get in.
Thank you for sharing that. Victor, did you observe any racist biases when you were at camp, or was there some underlying racism that was happening in the camps? What did you see?
Honestly, I ain't see anything because majority of the captains were Hispanic, so they didn't.
And the majority of the fire crew?
The fire crew were there were less whites, I will say. Yes, there was less whites, but it's at that conservation camp. It's who's applying to go. I'm not sure how the classification goes there, but there was a lot of African American brothers and Hispanics. There wasn't that many whites, but I didn't see any bias. If there was, I probably didn't catch it because I was always focused on just doing my job and going to school. So I wasn't paying that much attention. I would say only one person got a liking because of his military background. And I guess he was promoted fast and he didn't participate. That's the only one I seen that was getting favoritism there. So that was the only underline that I could see that they try to bias right there. No, usually the crew picks the captain or who's leading us, and this person was just granted that position because of his past experience that has nothing to do with forestry, but because of his veteran background.
That's interesting because a lot of male prisons are very segregated by race. And so in the fire camp program, all races come together to participate in firefighting. And so there's not a selection. What you're saying is there's not a selection process based on race outside of how they divide you and separate you within the prison walls.
In the camp, yes, there's segregation. Hispanics usually cell up with Hispanics, and African Americans with African Americans, and whites with whites. If you choose to cell up with somebody, that's all right, because in prison there's a lot of things called politics where you can't cell up with another race because if something happens, then it starts like a race riot. So even though you're at lower levels, they make sure that everybody stays with their race. But this has nothing to do with the captains. It's mostly inside the jailers. They make sure like you guys are sticking to you guys as ethnic, and which me, I had a lot of African American brothers as cellies. I never had a problem, but a lot of Hispanics do look look down upon other Hispanics that cell up with another race because it's like we're your own, and I never looked at color like that because my grandpa was Cuban, so I was like, to me it doesn't matter about the color, and it sucks that prison plays that card like we all have to be segregated, we can't become together united, and I always looked at it, that's just ignorance of people because we're all one race, and that's the human race.
Well said. Thank you. So let's talk a little bit about benefits and reentry, maybe lighten things up a tad bit. In what ways did participating in the program aid in your personal growth and rehabilitation? I mean, when you were in the fire camp program, did you think you were going to be a firefighter? Did you see yourself coming out and continuing on in fire service or taking on some other role in your community? I mean, how did you see being in the fire camp program benefiting your reentry?
Yeah, so I think for me, I came home 10 years ago, and I knew that I was paroling to the San Francisco Bay Area, and we had it instilled in us during our time there that there were limited options for folks reentering as far as in fire. And for me, the only possibilities at that time were CAL FIRE, which is like state or kind of rural county work. And it wasn't an option for me. I was coming home to the Bay Area. I had children. I couldn't come home and then leave them for months for seasonal work. And I would have loved, it was like a dream. I always wanted to ride on a ladder truck. Like I would have loved to, do some big city urban fire. Yeah, but it was not in the cards for me at that time. There have been some advances that have been made in policies that have removed some of the barriers, not all by any means, but at that time it just wasn't in the cards for me.
Well, for me, I just got out a year and a month ago. Thanks. I could have pursued, but you have to contact Ventura County. There's a program there for inmate firefighters to come out and join the service, but there's so many people trying to get in there, enroll in that it's a waiting process, and that just happened because of the laws that had changed to allow people to participate. But it's only for forestry that I know of. I would like to be like you were doing, a structural firefighter, because there's a difference between structure, as she was doing, going in the community, and there's forestry that goes out when there's big fires. So there's two different kinds. I I'm not sure if a construction fire will hire someone like me. Well, my application, I haven't really tried because I feel like I wouldn't even get in, honestly. I know forestry I can get in because there's a track record at CDCR that shows all the fires you've been to. So they actually do have documentation that I was out fighting fires and I'm qualified to go in the forestry at Cal Fire, just do their training, and I'll be able to participate. But I prefer to pursue my bachelor's degree instead. I think that instead of using my physical strength, I might as well use my brains for something else. So that's why I didn't pursue it. I would have loved it, but I would prefer a structural, being a regular engine firefighter than forestry.
Yeah, and just also thinking that, there was these kind of policies that I mentioned. Part of the reason that I couldn't go work at a municipal fire department, and it's just really the name for like a city fire department, was because one of the barriers where it didn't matter if I had my firefighter one or we'd just been fighting fires for years, right? But if you couldn't if you couldn't qualify for an EMT exam, that was one of the barriers in a municipal fire department. And so there's a policy that has been passed that now allows some people to have their records expunged who could then potentially qualify for getting an EMT license that would then allow you to apply. So I know we're going to maybe get into some of the policy stuff, but I do want to just name something that came out during the passage of all of these kind of policies over the years. And one of those is just really around the stigma of hiring a formerly incarcerated firefighter. In years of kind of working on different pieces of legislation about this, it has been really, really clear, like how much clear bias there is that exists within fire departments around hiring people with records. And there are many fire chiefs that went on record up and down the state saying that even if I had somebody that did have their EMT license sitting in front of me, if I had to choose between somebody formerly incarcerated and somebody that wasn't, it's a clear choice, right? So just even, on the way to like talking about barriers, it's not all policy related. A lot of this is around stigmas that exist within the fire service.
Stigma and gatekeeping.
Yep.
So let's jump into policy then.
Let's do it.
So a few years back, I want to say it was 21. It might have been 20. Assemblymember Reyes's bill was 2147. So that kind of jump-started the expungement process for formerly incarcerated firefighters to at least get their foot back into the courts to think about it. But it's not for everyone. Everyone's not eligible for expungement. Can we talk a little bit about what that looks like and who benefits from an expungement and whether or not you can get an expungement?
Well, I'll tell you right now, I can't get an expungement because
Why?
the expungement process only works for nonviolent offenders. And based that I was a violent offender, they will not expunge me. I'm pretty sure I can train in Ventura, but that's a different kind of program that allows the hand crews. It's basically the same thing we were doing inside. The members are there, all pretty much everybody that was inside. Like you were saying, that the gatekeepers, like I wouldn't be able to be with a regular firefighter because of the way they all look at me. He's a violent person. He committed violence a long time ago. Right off the bat, that disqualifies me.
But they knew that when they allowed you to participate in the program.
They sure did.
And you were able to go out and fight fires, save property and lives over and over and over again. And then when you served your time and you were returned to your community, all of a sudden you're disqualified.
That is correct.
I remember during this policy, that one you mentioned, one of the things that, someone said around this was like, it was one of the chiefs. He said, like, can you imagine letting a formerly incarcerated person into somebody's home? And I remember thinking, like, we were in people's homes when we were incarcerated. We were responding to people's homes. Nobody was asking about our background when we needed to perform CPR on somebody that was in an emergency, right? Those calls that we responded to in the radius of the prison where many officers lived, when we rolled up to scene and it was an officer's home on fire, which happened many times, they're not worried about what our background is. They're worried about our ability to get the job done. And so we were most certainly qualified when we were inside, and yeah, as soon as we were out, pretty much disposable.
Yeah.
I totally agree. I don't know that much on the policies because I already knew like it doesn't benefit me, so I stopped even paying attention. You know, and a lot of people that are violent, we don't look forward to that. It's just we did what we did, and like you said, we're disposable. But I always looked at it as being a fire camp as uh, it's, still it still is like the chain gang. I'm not gonna lie. It's still CDCR produces the bodies, and Cal Fire gives them a percentage. I always looked at it as like there's modern day slavery. A lot of people don't want to call it that, but it is. And when we come out, there's nothing for us. There's no integration. No, hey, we can help you in some way with schooling or to be a forestry fire. You still need to go through the same trainings you've been through. And I integrated when I came back home. There was nothing for me. It was you gotta live in a transitional housing on Skid Row for 6 months and figure it out after that.
No reparations.
Absolutely not.
But, you volunteered. You stepped up. You applied. You wanted to be of service. And in the end, the very lives and property that you're saving for the state, they just remind you over and over again that you're a felon and that you're not deserving of reintegrating into society and picking up your life where you left off, even after risking your life as an incarcerated person, paying your debt to society. So this is some of the policy problems that we have within some of these bills, that it does carve out people. It does discriminate. Only certain people are deserving of a second chance. And those people generally are those who are nonviolent. So if we could, just for a minute, imagine or reimagine a piece of policy, if we could write a piece of policy right now, or maybe there's a legislator out here in the audience, what would a bill look like that would be fair and acceptable to everyone who has volunteered and put their lives on the line to protect California and save $100 million a year through your labor? And thank you for your service on top of that. So what would it look like?
Thank you.
I was like, wait. Oh, I got policy dreams over here.
Because there is a bill currently. Assemblymember Bryan has a bill out, AB 247. It's about wages, and we'll end on money. And what would it look like if we could write a piece of legislation?
I do just, I like heart and soul, I get really excited around policy. And I also am very, very clear around the limitations with policy. Policy is like what we can achieve in a year or two, right? It's not the big dream and the big vision of actually creating some equity in the process. But I do want to say, like, striving on the way towards, there are some good pieces of policy that have made a difference in people's lives. And the wages one is controversial in the sense that I have always been such a an advocate for people getting paid just at least minimum wage, right? Like it is wild to me that we can think around paying people pennies. And so this Bryant's bill it's exciting because it is the first, step towards actually seeing us closer to minimum wage for people that are incarcerated. But that also leaves it up to CDCR to implement how these wages are going to be administered to people, and that's tends to be the problem. And so one of the pieces of policies that I'm excited around this year has to do with expungements. We've been kind of building on that bill every year, and this is one that would make expungements automatic, because one of the things that we didn't say about expungements is actually how much of a process that is. When most people are coming home from prison, they are thinking about the basics of housing and a job and reuniting with family and children, things like that. Delving into an expungement process without legal support or somebody walking you through this, it's not second nature to us. It's not like we know how to navigate these kind of processes, right? And so,
And just for clarity, what does the expungement do for a person?
all that does is allow you to even take the EMT test. I mean, as far
By
as
removing what from your record?
basically, so what the way it currently exists is that if you have a felony, you're not eligible to take the EMT test. And so that expungement removes that barrier for allowing you to even take the test. But there's still a whole lot more hoops. And I just also have to say that when this policy, the first version passed in 2021, our governor, Gavin Newsom, took this photo op, on the fireground, right? Like problem solved, because there had been so much kind of media and uproar around the labor that we are using in the state of California, right? And the realities of what that looked like. And it was such a staged thing. And I remember thinking it's only going to touch a handful of people, right? It is more than a handful, but it's not much more.
And Victor, before you respond, because fires are getting longer and they're burning hotter, and as we saw this year, they're just wiping out communities. And with the state of the world right now, with not having a lot of policy around climate controls, things are going to get worse. And without good policy and legislation to really help support folks like you coming home to use your expertise, your experience, what you've been doing to get into these roles on the outside and continue to do the service that you want to do. It feels like somehow legislators are not really in touch with what really needs to be done for you. So in your response, I would love for you to, again, imagine or try to reimagine what a bill would look like. What do we need to put into legislation that would really be helpful for the nonviolent, the violent, the men, the women, the transgender, the gender nonconforming, anyone who has gone through this training and who has put their life on the line to come home, and if they want to, get into whether it's wildland firefighting or structural firefighting or be an EMT or some other type of first responder, what would it look like?
I want to look like having people having more jobs to even deal with the fires, because we understand that not everybody's jumping in line to be a forestry firefighter or a structure fire. Just having the opportunity that anyone that's willing to put your life in the line to be of service should be able to participate in those programs that you do receive an expungement to pursue EMT if you want, be a firefighter, or be at the firehouse, or other kind of things that you're passionate about, like RN, LVN, there's plenty of opportunities if once you get an expungement, but there's always a process. I looked it up. The process is like to ethic committee to be an RN, even if you had a felony in your background. You can get it, but it's much harder to go through those hoops. And having an expungement would make it much easier that anybody that received a degree or wants to come out and get a certification for a job, it just opens the pathway for many people to work and make an actual living. And I think that would just help out a lot of states. Not also just California, but you're able to just go across the board and give people that second chance, like we say, equal opportunity, equal justice. Then a lot of people will be filling those roles that we're lacking in. Because in the pandemic, they weren't finding that many nurses or people to take on those jobs. But if you give a lot of people that are just a little piece of an opportunity, those roles will be filled. We don't know the endless, like the possibility, what roads it opens for everybody, because there's a lot of people in there that are really smart and do want to help the community, but they're just, like you said, the barriers. There's gatekeepers, and they tend to make sure that we're excluded from them so we can get the labor jobs.
One of the things I was thinking about is around, you've kind of mentioned a lot around violent versus nonviolent. And I did just want to kind of lift up, that's the way the system talks about us often, but we actually resist separating these into categories of people, right? Because it's not the case that because you've been convicted of a violent crime that you are a violent person, right? And every person is kind of looked at individually when you're accepted into the fire camp, and you've been determined by their classification score to be safe enough to be on that fire ground, to be responding into the community. So regardless of what you were convicted of, you were chosen to participate in this work that is it's one of the most trusted positions you could have on the inside, right? And so it is one of those things that we work our way towards that. And then, so one of the things I would love to see is an apprenticeship program where we're actually able to work in the community, where we're not held, where we are not currently incarcerated, but we are released in a kind of work program where we could actually earn and be in service and be striving towards, but not be state property, not be incarcerated, right? Because that's one of the things that it doesn't quite sync up. We're safe enough to be out there, but not safe enough to be home. And so, that's a longer term vision, but that's one of the things I get excited about is the real pathways towards career.
To incarceration.
Yeah, absolutely. That's right.
Well, thank you both. Before we turn it to the audience for questions, is there a call to action? Is there some type of charge you want to, call us to lean into?
Absolutely. Wages and apprenticeship. I thought about that idea inside. Why can't, if you're 2 years to go home, why can't you be an apprentice being in a Cal Fire or anything like that? That would be great. If things can make changes. If us being in this space right here can reach out to these legislators and let them see what, they do have an idea of creating some type of positive growth in the community and allowing these people to join.
Thank you.
I would just say, Sister Warriors is the org that I'm part of. We would love for people to tap in so that we could keep you updated and ask when there are real asks around legislation and policy that we need, people to take action on. So I invite you and welcome you to please join us, become a member. There's another organization, Initiate Justice in Los Angeles, that is spearheading a lot of this firefighter-related legislation this year. they're also an amazing organization, and you can stay up to date of what's happening through them as well. And then I just really want to lift up, because that gets to be my space, for women and gender expansive folks. And even in all of the kind of media that shined a light on the incarcerated labor force and the LA and their role in the LA fires. Not many people saw women or gender expansive folks at all uplifted in those media pieces. So I do want to lift up our 32 women and gender expansive folks that are housed in Malibu at the 2 camp programs there. One crew was the first responders at Pacific Palisades, and we never heard about that. So that's, again, just I want to lift them up. We're doing what we can also to create some reentry funds for the women that are paroling from Malibu.
Thank you. Thank you both. I believe we have some ushers out there with some microphones. So if anyone has a question they'd like to ask Amika or Victor, we have some very lovely people running around.
I first of all want to thank you for being here. Each one of you are amazing. I have so much respect and honor for what you're doing, and I wish you continued success. One thing I wanted to say is when these fires started happening in January, and I heard about the inmate fire program, I expressed some doubts in my Facebook community. And right away, I got literally jumped on by people who said, "How dare you? They are given expungement. They are being paid. They are doing all right. Leave it alone." And I was, okay, I'll leave it alone. Okay. A few months after that, there was an article, an in-depth online article about the complaints of the inmates in the fire programs, especially people of color. And it just talked about everything I was concerned about. So my question is, what I always wondered, and because I can't envision it, when you were out there, how were you treated by the firefighters and the other, because you didn't have enough food, and that hurts my heart. How are you treated with your fellow brother, sister, freed firefighters? Because I wanted to know what that relationship was about.
Well, I will say it's like a brotherhood for us. So us being out there being free, we tend to each other's back. There's no race in it. We're brothers in arms. Like a lot of people, they're in the military, they do the same thing. So we just show love and compassion to each other when we're out there, and we take care of each other because we know no one else is. And yeah, and I'm not gonna lie, like I said, the captains are the only ones that spoke up for us because they got to know who we really are, and that shows the empathy part of them. I don't think if they knew us for who really we were, they wouldn't have cared when other people were eating in front of us, knowing that we're just out there working and they're enjoying their meal. And to them, it was like okay. But our captains stood up for us, like, "Hey, what are you guys doing? You guys have been out there cutting line for you guys, and you guys are here eating them in front of them." We took that as disrespect, but we knew that we're just inmates.
I appreciate your question and thinking around hearing that everything is great and everything's okay, and then hearing some of the kind of real internal complaints come out. It's complicated, right? Because it is one of these things that the last thing I ever want to do when I walk into a space is sing the praises of CDCR, right? Like, I do not believe that our transformation as human beings and rehabilitation needs to take place in a cage. That doesn't sync with my beliefs. But I also don't want this program to go away, right? Because we do know that it is a better option. And so I just want to say that out loud. It's always like a little tricky around the way we navigate it, because 10 years out, I am very critical. But if you asked me when I was inside, I would have sang praises. And I just left Malibu 2 weeks ago and spent time with women on the inside there. That is very much the experience, right? When you are there, you are so grateful to be there. And you're also under the observation of officers, right? So there is nothing but good things to say. But, when you begin to understand the historical the context of this program, your analysis may shift and change, right? Once you're removed from things a little bit. So I did want to name that I think it's complicated for people to talk about it, particularly the people that are currently incarcerated and in these programs. And I lost what else.
Okay. Thank you.
I'm probably just yell. You talked about. Hi, thanks. You talked about some of the disparity with the food, and I was curious if there was any disparity with the safety equipment that you were allowed to or given to use.
That was, sorry, I just want to say, that was one of the things I forgot, is that yes, on the food, yes. I mean, two weeks away from a visit, and that was one of the biggest complaints in Malibu, was they do not have enough food. And so this is not unique to our experiences. This is currently happening. Like, our currently incarcerated firefighters do not have adequate caloric counts to be out there fighting fires that they are. No, pass it.
For your question, when it comes to the tools, all the tools are recycled. They understand that it's a revolving door, so all the equipment are not adequate to be used. It's people that hand them down. The prior people that use them leave them in the cages and they're redistributed. So yeah, they should be changing the equipment, but they don't because they want to save money. I've seen so many garages full of new equipment, but instead of giving it to us, they're like, "No, we just give you guys what you guys been using before," which it should be a change on that. But no one looks or never governs it to make sure they're giving us good tools to be used. Every tool is reused and reused all over and over again. So no, when it comes to safety, I don't think we're being provided the right equipment to go out there. We're using we use a thing called a shroud that blocks us from the smoke that we use. That's just rewashed linen over and over being passed out, and who knows what germs or how does that affect us later on? Because I don't think there's even statistics on that to show later on what are the effects of it not having the proper safety equipment. Each bag is handed down, and yeah, if you go through every house, you'll see that new equipments are just stayed right there, and if you look at what's their inventory, how much do you order a year when it comes to the tools or the safety of the water jugs or the water camel pack, they won't even give you a right number on what's been ordered because they don't order them. Everything's just reused, is recycled. Just like us, we're just manual labor. We're recycled. That's why I call it modern day slavery. Even though it is a good program when you're inside because, like I said, we use it to feel some type of honor now helping our community, and we enjoy doing it. But there's a lot of things that could be fixed to help us.
Thank you. I wanted to touch on the topic of wages because I know we've mentioned that you were making 35 cents an hour, you made $1 an hour. Can you contextualize that for us? I understand that people might think that basic needs are met on the inside. How much or what is your cost of living on the inside? How much do you have to spend on food? And also, what's the cost of healthcare, especially given that the job that you're doing takes such a toll on the body?
Such a good question. Yeah, this is one of the things I always, when I see the headlines about $1 an hour or even $5 a day, I want to be like, no, it's not everybody. I never made more than 36 cents an hour, or it was 32 or 30, but the check was $56 a month. And I was, kind of the top position in the firehouse, right? That was the best pay you could get there. And $56 a month, what that looked like as far as, hygiene, there's like deodorant costs $7. A book of stamps at the time, $7.80. Envelopes, things to stay in touch with your family, a bag of coffee, it's gone real quick. Let alone, if I had 3 children at the time I was incarcerated, and I was never able to ever support them in any way, right? And so, so that check is very small. And we have a lot of really kind of like basic things that we need to get with that check. Do you want to say any more to that?
Well, when it comes to the wages, I laugh when they say that we make like 10 or something daily. No, we don't. We make $7.85 a week. And if we fight a fire, that's $1 each hour we're out there. Some of us that have family, we're grateful because I had to ask my mom for money still when I was inside and I was in forestry. My check a month will come out to like $55. And the cost of getting adequate food in there, the prices went up. We understand that there was price gouging when we were inside recently. Soups are like, a case of soups is like out here. Like you pay $24 for a case of soups. It's, when it comes to hygienes, the prices are really expensive. $55 does not make it for anybody inside to survive. You're just barely getting enough. And if you're in the forestry, you're eating majority of your food in order to keep a diet because we're not receiving the adequate food to begin with. If we did, all that $55 would be being able to be put away. But we got to use the money that we gain working to buy us food because we're starving in there. And when we try to complain about it, the warden or whoever's in charge makes sure that, you keep crying about it, we're gonna put you in the hole and take away your opportunity to go out. So majority of us look for fires in order just to get food from the captains. Basically, we fought fires just for food. And every conservation camp's different. The one I was at Norco, that's just the worst, I believe, in my eyes, because they didn't care. You're still inside prison grounds. I wasn't outside as the other camps where they're out in the woods. I was still inside the setting, and I still ate the same thing as regular people that don't participate in fire camp. And we used to complain all the time, and they just tell us, okay, you guys are gonna get a write-up for disturbing the program here because you guys keep crying about food. And we just tell them, well, how about you go out there and fight a fire and you let us know if you're not starving. So, it does play a big factor, the wages, that people should get paid more if you're participating in that and you're not receiving the adequate food that you need. Because being able to sustain 24 hours fighting a fire and knowing you're hungry, that takes a toll on you mentally and physically.
I'd just like to add a couple things to the wages conversation. The majority of incarcerated people make $20 a month or less. The majority, about 70 to 80%. Then there are those who work in high-level clerical positions, or maybe they're part of PIA, the Prison and Industry Authority, part of construction or fire camp program, these kind of special training programs where they may make $1 an hour or a little bit more depending upon what their specialty is. But that is a small group of people. The majority of folks who are incarcerated make $20 a month or less. That's it. And as far as the nutritional value of food in prison, it's a 2,000 calorie menu. And it's not the best food on the planet. It's probably the worst food on the planet coming into prisons to feed people. It's overcooked. It's overprocessed. You know, most of it is canned, bagged, frozen. And what's on Canteen is all processed food, junk food, and the cheapest brands on the planet as well. And that includes hygiene. Very few name brand products. And then the markup sometimes is 300%, 400%, 500% on these items. So when folks get $20 a month, all they can buy is a tube of toothpaste, maybe a bottle of lotion, and a couple of top ramen. And then their $20 is gone. If they have the full $20 to spend, if they owe restitution to the state, restitution comes out first, and then you get what's remaining of your salary. So even individuals who make $56 a month, or maybe even $100 a month, if they're paying restitution, they're still only getting a fraction of that. So when we talk about labor in prison and when we talk about wages, there is really a need for a minimum wage. Folks deserve to earn based on the work that they do and the amount of work that they do. And we know that incarcerated people around this state are producing some really high quality products and saving property and lives at the tune of over $100 million a year. We know this. We know it every year. We see it every year. We read about it every year. They're on the news every year, and yet we continue to do nothing about it. So this is my call to action for all of you, and we're going to wrap it up. We've got to do something about it this year. We need to make sure that we are calling our elected officials out to do something about this. We don't need Kim Kardashian. Shout out to Kim, but put your money where your mouth is. These individuals are coming home and they're disenfranchised. And it really needs to stop. And I think we can do something about it in the state. And I'm calling all of you in to help us. So thank you all for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you all.